Hello, you absolute legends. For the past 27 years, GoldenEye speedrunners have been presented with a very simple problem. On the level control, we need to get from this door here up and around to this door here in the shortest possible time. Behind this door is Natalia, and we need to reach her to complete the level's objectives. If you run, taking the intended path, this takes around 6 seconds. However, there is an alternative path you can take. By destroying some nearby glass, you gain access to a different set of stairs, giving you a much more direct line. This glass can only be destroyed with explosives, but as it so happens, the level does give you some remote mines near the beginning. So it is possible to use one of those mines to destroy the glass and give ourselves access to the more optimal stairs. And indeed, on the easiest difficulty, Agent, players have been using a mine to destroy this glass since the early 2000s. If done optimally, this alternate path allows you to reach the second door in around 3 seconds, which saves a full 3 seconds, quite a substantial amount of time. And on the easiest difficulty, this strategy is rather elementary to execute. But on the hardest difficulty, 00 Agent, things aren't so simple. On 00 Agent, explosions do far more damage, and if you attempted to do the same strategy as players were doing on the easiest difficulty, you would instantly die because the damage is too great. And that is why on the hardest difficulty, players continue to run the long way around for well over a decade after this idea was first conceived. We just didn't know how to overcome this problem of the explosions being too deadly. And unfortunately, the explosion lasts so long that if you just waited for it to clear, you'd end up being slower than just taking the conventional route. However, over the past decade, GoldenEye speedrunners have slowly and steadily been chipping away at this problem. Step by step, piece by piece, they made progress, eventually getting through the glass without dying to save at least some time. But the strategy was never as fast as it was on the easiest difficulty, and we were still always losing time trying to avoid damage. That is, until today. After almost 3 decades, we have finally cracked the code and discovered how to get through this glass optimally, even on the hardest difficulty. And what's interesting is that the reason it took so long to find this new strategy is because our basic assumptions about how explosions and mines work in this game were completely wrong. Using common sense might be a good thing in the real world, but in video games and especially in speedrunning, it can be a huge mistake. In this video, we will take a look at how the GoldenEye speedrunning community tackled and eventually overcame this small but extremely fascinating problem. I really hope you enjoy. Now, as most of you know, my trial with Billy started this month, and while it's not finished yet so I don't know the result, what I can say is that in the photos captured by the media, I look pretty damn good. I've been exercising as much as I can, and I've been eating today's sponsor, Magic Spoon cereal. Magic Spoon is a high-protein, zero-sugar cereal. It's for people who want to look really good and who value their health, but they don't want to give up the naughty things in life like cereal. I can fit Magic Spoon easily into my lifestyle because of its macros. One serving contains 13 grams of protein, 4 grams of carbs, and again, no sugar. I usually eat Magic Spoon before bed or as a snack between meals. This really helps me stick to my diet. Magic Spoon also offer treats which are really tasty. These are honestly the best tasting high protein snacks I've ever had. Definitely give Magic Spoon a try, and they are so confident they offer a 100% money back guarantee if you are not happy. There are a ton of flavors to choose from, and you'll need to try them all to make sure you find the ones you most enjoy. So just click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen and use promo code LEGEND to get $5 off your order today. You can also grab Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. Ignoring the problem of getting through the glass safely for a moment, the level control on the 00 Agent difficulty is one of the hardest levels to survive in general. Speedrunners are quite literally forced to run through a gauntlet of guards just to reach Natalia to get her to start what we call the protect sequence. This is a lengthy section of the level where we need to keep her alive while she disables the GoldenEye satellite. And during this period, endless waves of guards come and try to kill not only Bond, but her as well. Survival is difficult as it is. So if we are to find a strategy to get through the glass, it not only has to be quick, but it has to be safe and not cause much damage. On the easiest difficulty, the damage from explosions is far smaller, and survival is just not a problem, so there we can get through the glass by literally blowing up a mine in our face. But on 00 Agent, this is simply not possible. For a long time, we didn't know how to get around the survival issue. So despite the glass strategy being used on agents since around 2002, by 2013 we were still going the slow way around on 00 Agent. In 2013, Mark Rutsu achieved a new world record of 4 minutes and 7 seconds without going through the glass. But then around a month later, Rayan Isran would tie that record with a new innovation. Rayan would plant a mine on the glass and then wait to be shot by a guard. In GoldenEye, when you are damaged, there is a period of time where you can't be damaged again, which is commonly known in most games as invincibility frames, or iframes for short. As soon as Rayan was shot by a guard, he would detonate the mine, and he would use those iframes to get through the explosion. This strategy was definitely faster, allowing him to reach the door in around 4.5 seconds, which saved 1.5 seconds overtaking the other stairs. And it only cost a single bar of health, which is how much you lose by getting shot. But this strategy was a nightmare to execute in practice. Because you need to wait until you are shot by a guard, that means you are now reliant on getting lucky with guard animations. Guards can take a wide number of actions. They can run around, they can roll, they can take time to start shooting, and they can decide to have terrible accuracy. So in order for this strategy to work quickly, you needed to get very lucky. And the last thing you want on a level like Control 00 Agent is to insert another huge variable. However, despite this, Rayan did use this strategy to lower the record to 406 in 2014. It was also in 2014 that a host of new strategies made the level more consistent. One of the most brilliant strategy finders in GoldenEye's history, Henrik Norgren, created huge optimizations that not only eliminated a lot of the luck variables, but also made the level much easier to survive. For example, in the past, we needed to physically clear out this entire room full of guards and drone guns, and then run past even more drone guns just to destroy a single mainframe. But Henrik introduced a trick that involved throwing a mine through the wall by looking down. This basically meant we now didn't need to deal with this entire room at all. New strategies like this made health less of an issue, and this led to the introduction of a different glass strategy called the double mine strat. This is where you place 2 mines on the right side of the glass and then run all the way to the left to get as far away as you can before blowing them up. This was a strategy developed back in the early 2000s, which was used on the medium difficulty Secret Agent. On Secret Agent, you can't use the agent strategy because again, you would die, but this strategy was a reasonable alternative. That extra distance from the mines is just enough to survive, because the further you are away from the explosion center, the less damage you take. However, it wasn't used on 00 Agent because it effectively took away half of your health that you desperately needed for the rest of the level. But with the health-saving strategies that had recently been introduced, it was now feasible to use this strategy on 00 Agent and still survive the rest of the run. With the double mine strategy, you could now reach the door in 4 seconds, half a second faster than the guard boost iframe strategy, but still at least a second slower than the agent strategy. And the question that might arise is, why are 2 mines used here instead of 1? This is because if you don't place a mine directly in the center of the glass, it will take much longer to break. So because you are placing the mines further away from the center in order to get some distance from them, you need 2 mines to break the glass instantly. Using this 2-mine strategy, Rayan was able to lower the record to 405 in 2014 and then 404 in 2016. In 2019, David Clement would achieve a 403, and again, he used the double mine strategy. A couple of months later in 2019, Rayan Isran would again lower the record to 402, and once again, he would implement another optimization. This time, he would only throw 1 mine in the center of the glass and then sufficiently get enough distance away to only incur a small amount of damage from the explosion. Now, this strategy wasn't necessarily faster because you have to get so much distance away from the mine, but at least it wasn't slower. And because you only lost a single bar of health instead of half of your health, this made the strategy overall a better option. The caveat is that this strategy is exceptionally precise. The timing of the explosion and the distance you need to be from the mine in order to both not die and not be much slower is insanely tight. And to this date, no one else has been able to replicate this particular glass strategy in the same manner. And for the next 5 years, no progress had been made. Aside from Rayan, who used that very specific strategy, most people were still using the double mine strat. But either way, both strategies were still a full second slower than Agent. And here's the thing. There is one crucial thought process that makes both of these strategies species slower than they need to be. The core concept of both the double mine strategy and Rayanne's more recent innovation was the idea that we need to distance ourselves from the mines in order to not die. And this is a completely reasonable thought process, because we know that if we are further away from a mine when it detonates, you are damaged less. This is not only what our usual experience of the game is, but it's also what you would expect. This is how things work in real life too. But as I said in the beginning of the video games aren't the real world, and the rules that govern video games should never be assumed or taken for granted. And there was one very simple oversight the entire community missed for almost 30 years that held us back. And it was one very counterintuitive realization that solved this glass problem almost immediately. Right now, I'm staring at a remote mine, and I'm playing on the Double Agent difficulty. If I detonate this mine, I'm killed instantly because I'm too close. We've already established this over the course of this video. Now I'm in the exact same situation again, but this time I've placed another mine to my left. Intuitively, you might assume two things if I were to detonate these mines. You might think that because there is a mine in my face, just like there was in the first example, that I would die. The second intuitive thought is that if the other mine is also in range to damage me, then if anything, I'd be extra dead, because now I'm also getting damaged by a second mine. But shockingly, if I detonate these mines, I'm only inflicted with a single bar of damage. This makes no logical sense. But in order to understand why this happens, we need to realize two rules of GoldenEye. First, you can only be damaged by a single object at any one time, meaning that if there are two explosions within range to damage you, only one will ever hit you. The other rule is that the way GoldenEye decides which explosion to hit you with has absolutely nothing to do with its distance from you. And what we didn't realize before, and have only just discovered, is exactly how the game prioritizes which explosion will count. Previously, we assumed either the closest explosion would hit you, or all of them within range, or it was random. But it's actually very specific. If I place two mines within range, it will always be the first mine that I placed that damages me. So if I place the first mine further away and the second mine in my face, it will still be the first mine that inflicts the damage. But here is where it gets weird, because if I were to take that exact same logic and apply it to the glass pane on control, placing the first mine further away and one in my face, it will always be the mine directly in my face that damages me, and I will always die. The logic appears to be the complete opposite, and this is because the logic the game applies depends upon what the mine is placed on. And for this, there are two main categories. One is the general terrain of the level, the basic structure, the walls, the floor, the roof, the basic outline that encompasses everything within. The other is the objects that appear within that terrain. These are the tables, the boxes, the things scattered around levels, doors, and yes, this includes the glass. When prioritizing explosive damage from mines placed on the terrain, it will always be the earliest mine placed, as I previously demonstrated. But when it comes to objects, for example this glass pane here, it will always be the last mine placed. And this is just the result of how the game keeps track of mines stuck to objects. The game needs to deal with them in a specific way, because when you place a mine on an object and then destroy that object, the game has to know to also detach the mine and let it fall to the ground or attach to another object. This is different to terrain, which can never be destroyed, and thus the mine will never need to be detached, and the game doesn't need to keep track of that potential mechanic. When you place mines into terrain, the game adds them into the code in the order they are placed as just another object, which explains why the earlier mine damages you, because the game reads that code first. When you place a mine onto an existing object, it's added as a child to that object. But every time you add a new child to that object, it's added to the front of the list. And that's why in this case, it's always the last mine you place that damages you, because again, that code is earlier and thus is read first. Things get even more complicated though when you mix and match the two. What happens when you have a mine placed on the terrain and a mine placed on an object? In this case, it will always prioritize the explosive damage from the mine placed on the object. This is because the objects of a room are already loaded into the code when the level begins. So when you generate a new object, for example a mine, it will be written into code after those pre-existing objects. And if a mine is attached to one of those pre-existing objects, it will be read first first and thus take priority. And then we can go even deeper and ask what happens if there is a single mine placed on two different objects. Well, in this case, it will depend on which object appears in the game's code first. So when the game loads a room, the objects will appear in a certain order within the game's code. So for example, this box on the left appears before this box on the right. So it doesn't matter which order I place the mines, it will always be the mine from the box on the left that damages me. And here's another situation which I'll let you speculate on in the comments. If I place two mines on a pane of glass, we know the last mine has priority. But what happens if I destroy the glass and let the mines fall to the ground? Does that same mine keep the priority? Does it depend on which mine you threw first originally? Or does it depend on which mine hits the ground first? So when we finally have the knowledge of these unintuitive rules, it becomes understandable why the community was so clueless as to what was going on. These rules aren't consistent, and they are certainly not logical. And what's interesting is that this new understanding has only come about after the following recent strategies were found through extensive trial and error. The entire catalyst for this new understanding was a tool-assisted video from the player Whitehead earlier this month. Here, he placed a mine on the door before the glass, which as we know is considered an object. Then, as he approached the glass, he threw a mine near the center of the glass and detonated it just before it hit. Because the mine is still in the air and hasn't landed on anything yet, it's still considered to be in the terrain. And because the door is read by the game's code first, he is boosted by that mine instead of the mine that's closest to him. And he is far enough away from the mine on the door to suffer only minor damage. This strategy is great in theory, but was too difficult to pull off by a human because of how precise everything needed to be. But it did inspire the player David Clemens to create a version where he placed a mine on the left side of a pane of glass to the left, and then the second mine on the center of the glass we want to break. Remember, if there are mines on two different objects, it depends which object is written into the game's code first. And it just so happens to be that the pane of glass on the left comes first, and thus it's that mine that injures us. And because that mine is further away, we take less damage. In contrast to the tool-assisted video from Whitehead, this altered version is relatively simple to perform, and using this strategy, it now took around 3.5 seconds to go from door to door. And not only that, it barely removed any health. But there is a way to optimize this even further. The shortest path between 2 points is a straight line, so we don't want to be running to the left side of the glass when we detonate the mines. However, if we run to the center of the glass and the mine injuring us is off to the left, this will damage boost us off to the right, which is not ideal. Thus, if we want a straight path through the glass to the stairs, and we want that mine to damage boost us forward in that same straight line, we must place the first mine either on the floor or the ceiling so that it detonates directly behind us. And when we throw the second mine, we must ensure that it's detonated in midair just before it hits the glass. If the second mine hits the glass, it would then take priority because it's now attached to an object, and this would kill us immediately when it explodes. This strategy obviously does require some skill, but if done correctly, it is comparable in speed to the existing agent strategy, and not only that, it barely removes any health. Now, finally, after nearly 3 decades, we have a strategy on 00 Agent that gets us from door to door in about 3 seconds, just as fast as on the agent difficulty, and on top of that, with plenty of health to spare. We haven't seen a new world record with this strategy yet, but given that it's a full second faster than the previous world record strategy, it's easier to implement and barely costs any health. I have a suspicion that we might see something very soon. A big thanks to Whitehead for working with me to figure out all of these mechanics. Thank you so much for watching, you legends. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video.